So just a few formalities before we begin to remind you that this isn't a private conversation.
Right.
And clearly is being redundantly recorded. We want this to be an enjoyable experience for you, so if at any point it becomes less than enjoyable, just let me know,
Okay.
and we'll redirect and make it fun again. My role in the conversation is actually to talk as little as possible. This is your story, so I'll be prompting you with some questions and some directioning, and maybe looking at my notes occasionally, but rest assured I'm tuned in. So for the formal introduction, today is Friday, November 2nd, 2018. My name is Andy Reisinger, and I'm interviewing Edwin Terry Weber here in the University Library at Georgia State University as part of the Great Speckled Bird Oral History Project. And before beginning, if I can just get your verbal consent to be recorded.
Yes.
So we'll start at the beginning. If you can tell me a bit about when and where you were born.
I was born in Doctors Hospital in Manhattan, New York City, March 28th, 1947. I grew up in Westchester County, Barksdale, New York, 20 miles north of Manhattan.
And who were your parents? Can you tell me a bit about your family background?
My father was an investment banker. He grew up in Philadelphia. He went to University of Pennsylvania and Harvard Business School on scholarship. His father was a GP who, old school, people bartered when they couldn't afford it, they didn't have a sweater. My mother grew up on Park Avenue. Her father was also an investment banker and was chairman of the American Stock Exchange twice. Once, the second time, the government asked him to come back in because there was some hanky-panky going on. Wanted him to straighten it out. So that's my grandparents and my parents.
And what were your parents' names?
Harry and Evelyn. My mother was a housewife, but also volunteered at for 25 years at Grasslands Hospital, the public hospital in Westchester, and also the schools. She worked in the schools.
And what sort of volunteering did that entail, do you know?
Well, she got an LPN actually in Atlanta during the war, Crawford War, I think. My father was in Naval Intelligence, and a period of time he was in Georgia because anybody born in Georgia before 1919 did not have a birth certificate. So he had to go to 157, how many county seats? I don't know if he went to all of them and say, who's this guy? Of course, they all thought he was a tax revenue guy for the anyhow, so she did she worked with blood banks, and so sort of and some paperwork at the hospital and intake interviews, patients coming into Grasslands and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And do you know how far back your families go?
Yeah. So all my relatives are Jewish, but my father's father, my father's grandfather came from, I think, Baden-Baden, Germany to the United States in 1870.
Okay.
And his wife came with him. With 2 kids, and then had 6 more. One me and my grandfather. My mother's father came to this country. Grandparents came earlier in, I think, the 1840s or 50s to, I think, Baltimore, I think.
Again, from sort of German area?
Yeah, well, I think part of it was from Poland, since his name was Posner, so I'm thinking it was part of that. Some of them, and then his wife's family came from I guess, France or Germany, depending upon which war, Alsace-Lorraine,
Mm-hmm.
on the border. So, yeah, but all way back.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know how your parents met?
I think they probably met at, they both went to sort of Jewish summer camps in Maine. I think that's where they met. Because my mother grew up in New York, I grew up in Philly.
Right.
But actually the camp my father went to was founded in, Jewish camp founded in 1907, and I went to it too. So I think that's where they met probably.
Mm-hmm.
And the inner circles of mutual friends, I think.
Talk a bit about your childhood, schooling.
We lived in Hartsdale, which was a small community, mostly white. My neighborhood was I don't know, probably 30% Jewish, and most of these people had come from Manhattan. The development was, I was born in 47, they moved there 25 days after I was born, or 25 days before I was born, actually. And the neighborhood was new. It was built on part of it was built on the old Warburg estate. They sold it, made a development there. So it was the kind of neighborhood where you could play ball with a bunch of kids in the neighborhood right there. And we went to Maine every year since I was 3 for summer vacations.
Which part of Maine?
Let's see. Near Waterville, Maine is where the camp was. We would go kind of near there. I forgot the name of the places. It'll come to me.
And is it more coastal?
No, inland. Southern inland.
Yeah.
Southern inland. Something lakes, what's it called? I don't know. It'll come to me. So that was, there's a lot of summers. And I went to sleep, and this is a different thing. I went to that camp from 9 to 15, 8 weeks every summer.
And what is the camp called?
Kennebec. And we did everything. We learned to sail, we learned to chop wood, canoe, using poles going down rapids, sailboat races, shooting rifles, playing baseball, soccer, tennis, and trips. We always took, every year you took a trip, depending on when you're younger, you climb mountains like Mount Katahdin and camped out, and when you're old, you did canoe trips, and your last year, 15, you went to Chesuncook, Maine, which is, up until a couple of years ago, you couldn't drive in. You had to take a boat or a plane. And we hung out there for 6 days, canoeing on rapids and stuff, and then we took off on an 11-day trip down the Allagash Waterway, carrying canoes across carries, and ended up at Fort Kent, Maine, the beginning of US 1. That was my last year at camp. No, I actually went back to be I worked in the kitchen for a summer there.
Mm-hmm.
That was a few years ago.
And were you pretty into those sort of outdoorsy
Oh yeah,
activities?
no, I loved all that. I loved
Yeah.
hands-on stuff. Yeah. I loved learning. I mean, they would do. You couldn't go in a canoe, on a free period unless you passed a test, which was to canoe across the lake, one person in the canoe going straight, or a rowboat straight across and back. They tested you on these
Mhm.
things, and so you became proficient with that stuff. So it's good. So gave you confidence, and and then being in the Maine woods at night, sort of.
Mm.
You drive it, you paddle into, you had 3 counselors and, 20 kids, and you paddle into a campsite, and it had been raining all freaking day. So the counselors, go find some dry firewood, and, you had to split some wood, and, all that kind of stuff.
What were some of your other interests, hobbies as a young person?
Sports, soccer. Junior high school, we had this ridiculous coach. Every time he'd say, "What do you guys want to do today?" So 12 months a year, we all wanted to play soccer, so we just played soccer all day. It's kind of helped when I got to high school, so.
So you continued playing?
Yeah, and then my community used to go to White Plains High School, but then my older brother was the last year they could go there because they were building one high school and kicked out the smaller communities. So my high school became Woodlands High School, which is a brand new high school. I was in the 10th grade, and there was only 11th graders there, and it's a completely integrated community. Poor, rich, black, white, some Hispanic.
And it was at that time?
It was, yeah. And it was great. I mean, we had new teachers who were inventing new stuff, young folks. This was 63, 64, 65, interracial dating. I mean, it was like we were all thrown together, and we had to invent everything, like the school rings, yearbook, because we were all new. So we had some young teachers who were great, who I'm still friends with. Actually, they're not that much older than me. You know, I'm 17 and they're like 24, right? So it's like, back then it's like, oh, but now it's like, so it was a different thing. So it was a really good experience, high school. We had all this, we went on peace marches, integrating things. And so there was some, I was in the school band. I don't know what the hell I was doing, but I was in the band.
Playing?
The baritone one. And I was co-captain of the soccer team, and co-captain of the wrestling team, and I was on the track team. So it was a lot of activity. Not so much with the academics, but the only thing I was ever good at was math. So I don't know what it was, but that's what it was.
And you mentioned a brother? Do you
I have an older brother who's 18 months older. For many years, he was a lawyer, but he worked for the Office for Children's State of Massachusetts, and then he went into private practice, and he defended mentally ill folks and defended kids. The judges would say, "These people get divorced. I want to know what the kids' interests are." So he would do that, and he would do mentally ill folks. And his theory was, if they're not harmful to themselves or somebody else, they could be as crooked as they can be, but they shouldn't be incarcerated. And then, of course, you can find psychiatrists to say the other thing too, but so that's what he did for many years. Then my younger brother lived in Holton, Maine, the end of '95. He ended up going to college there. I don't think he graduated, and he was worked for a potato farmer, and then he got into his own business. He worked for Louisiana Pacific, and then he got his own business as a sort of a boiler mechanic, heating specialist. He had his own business, and people relied on him. He'd come out anytime to fix anything. But he was 4 years younger, and about 6 years ago, he died from a wasp sting. He'd been allergic to bees, but he could always take care of it with an EpiPen, and he kept being tested and injected with things that would prevent it, but that worked as not. Yeah, so we go up. My wife and I go up to Maine every summer to visit his wife and my niece and my nephew. We live in Holton, and my niece lives in Portland, so we go hang out with him for a while.
Yeah. Scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. He's known he's been that way since he was 12.
Mm-hmm.
He passed out at the swimming pool. We had a swimming club, and someone found him passed out at the water fountain. Put him in an ambulance, and so found a little bee sting on him or some bug.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
And what are your brothers' names?
Bill is the younger one who died, and Bob. So
Okay. You mentioned your school and just how diverse it was, and being engaged in the current events and politics of the times.
Mhm.
Can you talk about sort of your political coming of age, coming into political consciousness?
Well, there were sort of two things. One, civil rights movement, which we were aware of, although we were a bit younger. And so we, of course, were for the civil rights, for voting rights, and what is this, different people back of the bus. That didn't make any sense to us. It was also somewhat the height of the Cold War. So we had these ridiculous things where we were supposed to duck and cover, get under our desk, and we're all going, what? There's going to be a freaking atomic bomb getting under my desk? What the hell's that going to do? So there was an anti-ban the bomb movement, and that kind of stuff. And then later on in high school, there was, of course, I graduated in '65, so it was also Vietnam War protests, and what are we going to do to keep out the war? And the government kept making changes. If you went to they changed it. If you went to college, you didn't have to go when you were in college, and after you graduated, we'll draft you. And if you're married or you had one kid, there was all these changes about who was going to get drafted and stuff. And then, so there was some of that going on, not much, but some Vietnam War, anti-Vietnam War stuff going on, and the ban the bomb stuff. There was a march down to New York. We marched from Westchester down. We stayed in church in East Harlem, I think. Can't remember. So there was that going on.
And you participated in these?
Yeah, we did. But it was, I don't know, it was, you're young, it's not that political, it's political, but it's also social, young people marching without their parents, and, there was all that going on too, so it was, it was a taste. It was a taste.
How did you become acquainted, though? Even were there school clubs or organized, like students on campus that were very
Yeah. Well, there was a
political
little newsletter, so there was some articles written about that, and I think 20 of us or 30 of us went on that demonstration, and it was written about it, and we wrote about it in our school paper. So it was like before and after, and it's who your friends were, who went on it. Yeah, it's hard to remember what really gets you started to do that stuff. I mean, my parents were liberal parents. My father was a fiscal conservative. My mother was a Democrat, and of course her parents were Republicans. When my mother grew up on Park Avenue, and during the war, she got picked up by an integrated group of people that went over to Jersey to build airplanes. And then she got allergic to some of the paint they were using, so she got another job working in a daycare center in Harlem. And so my father tried to actually, before White Plains closed off the high school, my father was on a local board, and he wanted to integrate it into school systems that are elementary schools close to White Plains border. They could use we would share the school space, So he tried to, he saw this coming, and he thought of a way to integrate our schools and help them with more school space. That didn't quite work. So, those elements of liberalism was in our family, so it was not that they, pushed us to protest the war. None of that was happening. And my older brother was also involved in some stuff, so that was when your older brother's involved in it too,
right.
That's an influence.
Yeah. Speaking of influence, growing up, are there people or events that stand out in your mind as being really influential, from very local, familial sort of people up to, national figures, just folks that made a big impact?
Well, I think the big impact came when I left college, because I was going to be drafted in 1969. And my father had a friend who was a big advertising guy, and he thought up of the name VISTA, which was Volunteers in Service to America, sort of Peace Corps on a domestic level. I think they call it something else now. So he said, you should go into that, because they'll keep you out of draft for another year. So, so I said, hell yeah. So that was the really beginning of the political awareness. We trained in Southwest Colorado. We trained about 60 of us. Half were married couples, and the other half was single women and single men. The married couples and the single men were mostly in it to keep out of the draft. I mean, they thought it was a good thing too, I think, but it was mostly that. And the single women were just the thing they wanted to do. So we trained in Southwest Colorado, in Nashville, Colorado, a very, very poor, 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3 white, 1/3 Native American, 40% unemployment rate. We worked there, and we were trained by the sociology department at the University of Colorado in Boulder. They would keep us confused because they said you were going to be working with people who were confused. So they would give us our schedule of what we were going to do in Spanish, and it was the day before what we did. They dropped us off at this shack near a little creek. We just left. We didn't know what was going on. Then they come back with 26 of the oldest chickens you could ever imagine. He says, this is your lunch. This is how you will kill your lunch. This little guy, Rocky, stands on the hood of a truck, takes a chicken by its head, swings it around, the body goes running off down the path. So we found some old box springs, and we created a creek, and we boiled water, and we cooked these chickens. So we were doing like stuff like that all day. They were keeping us confused. And one day they said, okay, we've got 3 more days. This guy burned his house down. We're going to build a frame for him. So we worked 24 hours, 3 days, laid a foundation, built the sides, put the roof on. So we had to raise money to get the materials.
And were they training you to do these things?
No. Well, no, because
training on
we
the
were
fly?
all college grads. We had an architect with us. We had this with us. I had worked with my hands before. I mean, we had to, make do. Because that's what we're going to, and that was probably made sense, because that's what we have to do when we got, they said, okay, where do you want to be stationed? I said, cement, bagel shops, a city, get me. So I got, in that region, I was put in St. Louis, sort of near Pruitt-Igoe, the black-white ghetto in St. Louis, which I'm convinced half the people I work with are moved to Ferguson, which is just north of our community. Because Pruitt-Igoe then blew up. It was one of the largest housing projects in the country, 75 buildings, 12 stories, no playgrounds. Disaster. So once you get into Vista, then you're against the war, and you're putting in, you see this poverty stuff going on, and politics starts really pumping up.
And what were you supposed to be doing there?
Well, we worked for a poverty agency. You work for a poverty agency in St. Louis, on St. Louis Avenue. I did some, a friend of mine and I, who was a photographer, we did some photography so that we could publicize what they were doing to try to raise money. We thought the dark room was a great place to keep our marijuana. Nobody would check it. Don't expose that paper. And then we decided to have a drop-in center for teenagers because it was disgusting. They were, what Duco cement is. It's a green tube of cement you use to put plastic airplanes and tanks together with. They take a whole tube of Duco cement, squeeze it into a plastic bag, and put it over their head and breathe in.
I'll get you high.
It was a cheap high, and who knows what else did. So we thought so we had a drop-in center where we had some, we had some pinball machines or something. We made enough money through the Coke machines and that to pay the rent, and we had a pool table or something, and the teenagers would come, and we started talking to them about politics, because they were going to be prime bait to go to the war.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought it'd probably be better for them to smoke marijuana than sniff glue. So we did that for about a year, and then my so we did lots of things with power property agencies and stuff like that. And part of the time I sold papers for the St. Louis, some counterculture paper, I can't remember what, St. Louis, something or other, Outlaw, St. Louis Outlaw maybe. So I sold it on campus of St. Louis University. People would buy papers. And then I also, part-time, I worked at night in a bar in the sort of gaslight section of St. Louis, which was kind of good in a way, because when the ROTC building got burned down at Washington University, the FBI was calling everybody. So they called, and we knew you didn't have to talk to them, but they called me, and I said, well, I was working at the bar, so that was the last I heard of them. So it was sort of, it's 1969, 70. I mean, something new was happening every day around the country. It's nuts. It's completely crazy. You couldn't believe what was going on. I mean, I went to this museum in Washington last 2 years ago. News Museum. It's a museum about newspapers and stuff. And they had special exhibits every now and then. So they had special exhibits on the Civil Rights Movement. So, and they had sort of headlines of the Times, right? So they got the Times, and they got the 3 workers in Mississippi. I don't know if it was missing or they found them. The same day as the Gulf of Tonkin. It's like you realize so much stuff was going on every day. So then I got it after Vista. We started a food co-op, but we realized it was just extra work for the working class women in the neighborhood. That the guys are going to factories, coming home drinking 6-pack. They ain't going to participate in that. So a couple of us decided to get jobs where the people in the neighborhood got jobs. So the first job I got was I made shoe shanks, which is a little piece of metal in shoes that keep the arch in a shoe. I worked there for about 3 weeks. Horrible job. Hot. And a lot of these factory workers were the Great Migration, white and black, coming from Mississippi, Alabama to St. Louis, Chicago, Cleveland, working factories. It was a company union, and paid minimum wage, $1.67 an hour. And I had to take all these shoe shanks and sprinkle them through a 1400-degree oven to get them just right. You can't cook them too long or too soft, and then dump them in acid, and then dump them in water, and then ship them away. It lasted 3 weeks. Then I got a job in a Teamster shop. Missouri Bolt, working evening shift, packing bolts and steel rods. So it was a Teamster shop, and we weren't getting paid as much as drivers, but it got me into the Teamsters. And I was the union rep for my little shop of 8 people. And then I got me into 688, which is Harold Gibbons' local. He was the 5th International Vice President of Teamsters, and he was this liberal Teamster dude. He went to Hanoi during the war to talk to the unions over there. But his own local was blowing up because the biggest shop within our union was the Teamsters, was the UPS workers. And the head shop steward of the UPS workers, I think 600 workers at this place, and the assistant, the white guy and the black guy, were fired for having a picket line, not on company property and not on company time. So we got upset.
What were they picking?
The conditions, because the Teamster supervisors were manhandling people, putting them up against a truck if they did something wrong. We got information and documented it where the machinist union were taking care of the trucks. And you'll never see a UPS truck with a dent on it. They fix them every night. You'll never hear of UPS getting in an accident because they pay the police, if they do get an accident, not to advertise it. This was back then. And the drivers were going crazy. They said, this is a slash in the tire. They just put paint over it. They should be fixing these things. So that's what this protest was about. So they got fired. So we're at this union meeting, the job stewards from this, and so she says, And so the business agent, who's a paid full-time employee of the Teamsters Union, didn't defend these guys. So in the Teamsters bylaws, to be a business agent, you have to come out of a Teamster shop. Right? Makes sense. You have to be a worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he said, what shop does this guy come out of? He said, the Central Conference of Teamsters. He worked in the office for the Central Conference of Teamsters, and of course, office workers have a Teamster union too, representative. Sure. It was like garbage. So Gibbons didn't used to run the meetings because he was out doing other stuff, and his vice president couldn't handle it, so he had to come back and run the meetings because we were causing so much trouble. We would picket the union hall, but we said, if we can't get 10 of us to go, we're not picketing because the goons and everybody, so, you know, that kind of stuff. So they got their jobs back eventually, but it was a lightning rod for, and so some of us went to, I think it was Denver in 71 or so, which was the founding convention of TURF, Teamsters United Rank and File. People were pissed off at Al Hoffman ruined the fucking union and fixed the jury and all this other kind of stuff. And so I was only a Teamster about 2.5 years. But eventually that TURF became part of Teamsters for Democratic Union that still exists today and is trying to democratize the Teamsters Union, which I still actually give them some money.
And this whole time, are you still working in the bolt shop?
Yeah, 2 years, 2.5 years. And then our rep, so 2 women worked in the middle of the warehouse, putting short steel rods in cardboard tubes. And then they'd seal the tubes with some hot plastic. They'd melt this plastic and put the tubes in there. And there's smoke coming all in the warehouse. And I'm going, this don't look good. So I called the union guy. He didn't do shit. So I went down to the city. I said, I think you need to check this. This air quality is probably not so good for these women and the rest of us. This idiot, he comes in a trench coat and goes around. The next day there's an exhaust fan, and the next day I'm laid off. Because my particular shop, some shops have super seniority for union reps, job stewards. So if they cause trouble, you can't lay them off. We didn't have that, so I was laid off. So then I got a job at Crundon Martin Manufacturing, which is a steel worker in St. Louis. And first thing I did was I put the blue and red lines on notebook paper. To this day, I pick up paper and go, oh, this is crap, they should have changed that pin, that was ridiculous. It's like the weird things you think about when you do these things.
Yeah.
And then the notebook place was going through some changes. Oh, it was fun. One thing there was completely ridiculous. So we had 2, I think, 60-inch cutter blades because we made them at 16, enough paper for 16 sheets, and we had to cut them. So one machine, copyright, or whatever, 1897. So it had one hand to bring the 60-inch blade down, and the safety mechanism was a wooden knob you were supposed to put your other hand on. Right? And right next door to it was a new German machine with the same size blade, but electronic buttons on both sides. If both of them weren't pressed, it wasn't happening. And I'm going, so why don't they get rid of this other one? So anyhow, that was done for about 3-4 weeks, so they put me down in the garbage can, galvanized steel garbage cans. So we had a crew of about 18 making these garbage cans. So they'd come in flat, not stainless steel, metal. And I would pick them up and give them to 2 guys, and they would put them in these machines, and they'd crunch them, make them stronger. And then they'd weld them together. And then we used to spot weld the handles on the lids. So my 3rd day there, I'm picking up a sheet, and they're sharp, and it goes right through my glove. There's blood spurting out, right? What's the boss say? Weber, you ruined one of my fucking gloves. What are you doing? I said, I'm going to the nurse. I'll see you later.
How long were you on that?
I was on that for about a month or two, then I went back to making notebooks and papers and stuff, and then we decided to move to Atlanta.
And who was we?
I had just gotten married about a year before. I had a baby coming due, and 3 other people who were in, 4, well, my wife, who was not in Vista, but 3 other people who were in Vista a year after me. And I was in Vista with a couple from Georgia State. They had gone to Georgia State, and I think part of them started SDS at Georgia State in the 60s. And so they were in Vista to keep out of the draft. And
Who were they?
Let's see. Rick Brown, Susan and Rick Brown.
Okay.
Rick was on the bird.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had visited Atlanta while in Vista. And so we said, oh, it sounds like it's a small town. So then we moved to Atlanta in 73, summer 73, and I got interviewed and became the distribution manager of the Greensburg Bird.
Okay, well, before we get there, go back on a couple things. The shop that you're working at with the notebook paper and garbage cans,
Yeah,
was that a union shop
Yeah.
as well?
steelworkers,
Okay.
real union shop, yeah, steelworkers. But it was, there wasn't much union activities. I mean, there was just the union was just running everything. There was not much input from people who worked there. There wasn't so much like the Teamster shops were, or the telephone workers shop I was reading here. It was kind of straightforward stuff. It was that manufacturer became fairly famous. It's closed now. They made plastic bags, garbage cans, barbecue grills, lots of things. I remember people with missing fingers working there. Who knows what else was going on. So I got my hand caught in the way the paper machine works. You get a 15-pound roll of paper. You roll it into a big bar. It goes onto a belt, and then a blade would cut it, and then the sheets would go on cloth rope that would go down, and then hit under these brass pins that would hit red ink, and it'd go down a corner, and then air would suck it, and then it would go the other way and hit blue pins, and then go down into a jogging box to put the papers back together again. So my thing got jammed one day, and I was trying to unjam it, and my hand got under the roller. That hurt like hell. Of course, the boss saw it and left. My coworkers came by, and we pried it open and got my hand out. And so I lost a little numbness in my hand and stuff. So it was a union shop, but there wasn't much union activity going on there. And there should have been more because the health and safety wasn't so good in the place.
Yeah.
So actually, when I left to St. Louis, I decided not to show up for work for 4 days, so they fired me. So I was able to get unemployment insurance for a while when I went to Atlanta.
Good strategy.
I mean, not that it was a lot of money, but it helped.
Yeah. And to jump pretty far back, we went from high school to Vista.
So
and
college-
left out your college years.
Well, college was in Fairleigh Dickinson University in Madison, New Jersey. And that campus was more of a residential campus. Rutherford and Teaneck were more commuter. There was a higher percentage of commuters who went there. Fairleigh Dickinson was started in the 50s, and a lot of people who went to Fairleigh Dickinson back then were their first generation of college students for their families. So it was kind of that. I mean, it wasn't free. It wasn't. It was, it was I guess an average cost of college. So
How did you choose Fairleigh Dickinson?
Well, I applied to 5 colleges. I got into 2.
Mm-hmm.
I played soccer, which I think helped a little bit. My academic record, I was really good at math, but everything else I wasn't really good at. So, and I'd also, once I got in there, I had real struggle with language. But if you don't take a language, I was told in junior high school, don't take a language in high school. You'll have some disability. They didn't use the word disability. I forgot what they used. But if your high school offers a language, you don't take it, then it's hard to get into college. So I took 4 years of French and almost made it through French 2 in high school. So when I got to college, I said, I ain't doing this. So Fairleigh Dickinson had fine arts, business, and liberal arts. And liberal arts is what most people took, but there's 2 years of college language. I said, that's not happening. So I became a business major. And then took my business requirements and then took electives in other subjects. So, and I was on the soccer team. I didn't start till second or third year, I can't remember. And then I went into intramural sports, and we had fraternity, just local fraternity. It wasn't no national stuff. I became president of it last year, and I was also chairman of the financial board, and so we did things by the book. And so a friend of mine and I decided to call it was Morris County, or Morristown, Morris County Gourmet Society. So we applied to go to Brotherhood Winery in upstate New York. So we put in for gas money for the Volkswagen and this and that, and we ended up getting 6 bottles of wine, bring it back and have a party. See, go leave.
For the fraternity.
Well, no, forget them. This is for my friend and I and our friends. No,
Okay.
This is not a fraternity thing. We were in the same fraternity, but we didn't do that shit. Yeah, so. And another friend of mine did a little bit of, we weren't really an SDS chapter, but we were sort of handing out some flyers and leaflets, not too much. Some minor stuff going on there, not much in Fairleigh Dickinson University, and not much for me either. Very limited.
And where's it at in New Jersey?
Madison, New Jersey. It's like 40 minutes from New York City.
Okay. Are you interacting with folks at Rutgers or CUNY or Columbia? No.
Not much. It's kind of more of a social thing. My college experience was a little bit of politics, but not much. Not much at all. I tried to pass my college classes. It was a hard time. I was on academic probation the first semester. Trying to figure out what the hell they wanted and all that kind of shit. So then I figured out what they wanted and I did fine. I said, I don't have to read all this shit. Just read the first chapter and see what else is going on. You don't have to read all these books. It's too much reading.
And then you, from there, go into Vista.
Yeah.
And then start
Yeah,
doing.
I'm in St. Louis because I stayed there and had other friends in Vista, and I had friends in Vista who, a friend of mine was a lawyer, and he started the National Welfare Rights Organization in St. Louis. We had anti-war protests. We brought people to Washington against the war. There was there was so much activity going on back then.
Yeah.
Protest at Washington University, at St. Louis University. Poverty work.
An anti-war protest
Yeah.
at Wash.
Yeah. They burned down the ROTC building.
You were at work.
I was at work.
And as
Tending bar, actually coming down from acid. There's the best way to come down from acid, go to the bar. Tend bar.
and drink through it, or
No,
no?
I didn't drink when I was at the bar.
Okay.
So it's a funny bar. I mean,
Why do you say that's the best way to come down?
well, the problem with LSD, if you get good stuff, which we try to test, is it just lasts too long. It's not like psilocybin or something else that's 2-3 hours. LSD it can just last too long. And we paid Richard Albert and what's his name's advice. Leary's advice. They sort of used it, invented it at Harvard.
Mm.
Their advice was, you need a plan. You need to have someone who's not taking it. If you have to drive, you have to have food ready. You have to be in a place where it's not crazy, like off in the country. So, I mean, you know, they made some sense about this experience, which we basically did, which most people didn't do.
Right.
Like, go to the movies on the acid? I don't think so. Anyhow, so after most of the hours were over with and you were, you know, reasonable, okay, you still felt a little druggy or something. And so doing something that didn't make, you had to think too much about it. You know, and if people came in, if their ID looked legit, did I care if they were 19 and not 21? I didn't care. But if it looked legit, you know, I said, oh, well, that was the main thing. I was, you know, how to make sure that they had some legit, because there were a lot of St. Louis University kids who came in there to Washington U.
And what'd your folks think of your track into Vista and then working in
When
these
I
various
started
blue collar manual labor jobs?
My father actually just thought that I was ahead of society. Thinking that things should be more equal, and thinking, yeah, we need to get there, but we ain't there yet. I sort of says, yeah, we need to be there now. So I think he felt I was sort of, and he also, he had in my early 20s, his only advice was, which I thought was great, he says, when you're 40, I want you to look back and be happy with what you did. And I don't care what that is. Because at that time, I'm working in a factory. My younger brother's picking potatoes. My older brother's a lawyer, but he's working for Office for Children, ain't making squat. And he says, listen, I got friends in Scarsdale. And their kids are out on drugs and doing this and doing that and doing that. I never, you know, I had worked in my father's office at Wall Street for, you know, during the summer.
Like in high school?
College.
College.
And I worked with the guys in the back office. These were kind of working class guys who were doing all, you know, all the work. They were all making overtime by Wednesday afternoon because they'd been there so many hours. And they'd send me home. You go home. I said, no, I'm going to help. No, you go home. And, you know, and they tell me, at that time my father had become a partner. And they said, your father's the only person who calls us by first name in the elevator. No one even speaks to us in the elevator. That's a pretty good lesson without being told. And the guy who hired me offered me a job. He says, we usually do not offer jobs for sons and daughters of people here. But what am I thinking? I thanked them. It was, yeah, so.
And your mom, did she give you an
She
impression?
felt the same way.
Yeah.
No, yeah, she, you know, she's whatever you do it right. And that was her thing. She died a couple years, 2 years ago, 97. But she's clearly a being a bonnet woman. I mean, my father died, and the next day she's getting rid of his clothes, she's changing the bathtub into a walk-in shower, you know, and we go, wait, some of your grandkids might want this stuff, don't give it away yet. She's that kind of person, so.
Get on with it.
Yes, absolutely.
Tasks to do.
Absolutely unbelievable.
And you said that when you came to Atlanta, that you were coming with your wife and young child. How did you meet her? Who was she?
She was best friends of two people who were in Vista before me. I mean, after me. They were a year after me. I was already working in a factory, and I became friends with the Vistas who came after me. Mm-hmm. Showed them some of the ropes and what we were doing, and all three of them had gone to college together in Western Pennsylvania. So when she came to visit a number of times, and then we fell in love, and she stayed.
And what's her name?
Pam Benvenuto.
And then you had a child in when?
73.
Okay. So right as you're moving,
Mhm.
right before moving to
Mhm.
Atlanta. And you said that you had visited Atlanta
Right.
before you actually moved here.
Yes.
What was it? Well, you described it as a small town or a small
Well,
city.
it was, it was easy to get around. It wasn't anything. It was like, and I had gone with my friends who were political folks, so I was hanging around their friends in Atlanta who
Mhm.
were political folks. Neil Herring,
Mm-hmm.
and David Cosgrove, and I don't know, I can't remember all these people's names. So, and they also seemed, David Govers, who lives in the LJ now. I mean, so I had met I met these people, and it seemed like, pretty decent people, cool people, and livable town, easy to get around with. Piedmont Park right there. Of course, back then the Piedmont Arts Festival was like tiny. A couple of flip tables and people putting stuff out. It was, and then eventually that became a boom for us, the actually Piedmont Arts Festival. The two of our kids went to Grady High School, and someone before us had started doing parking for the Arts Festival, but we upped the ante when my wife and I became PTA president, co-presidents. So one year we raised the price for parking. We had the principal selling tickets for parking. We squished cars in all over the place. We made $12,000 in a 10-day period. Bought the teachers a Xerox machine. Principal loved us.
Yeah.
So that's why it seemed like a great place to move. St. Louis is a straight. It's so far from any kind of water. There's no mountains. It's surrounded by right-to-work states across South Atlanta. I don't know. It was just. I guess we had enough of St. Louis.
Was that even true in the early 70s, that the right to work?
Oh yeah. I mean, Missouri was. Missouri had 3 auto factories. It was a central place for teams all across the country because all the trucks were going up and down. Right? So there was a lot of unions there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still probably, but all the states around it, it's like nuts. I mean, I come here, and after the Bird, I said, I gotta get a union job. So it was telephone workers, right? And I went and applied, and they said, the only openings we have is operator. I said, okay, fine. They said, you're overqualified. I said, okay, I'll work for an operator for a few years, and then so I got a job as an operator out of Norcross, $100 a week.
And what did you think of the sort of social scene, the mood of what was going on in Atlanta
Well, I was around the
73.
Bird, so that's a little bit of a bubble. So our friends were, there was lots of talk of feminism and equal rights and integration and, all those battles we had. And so there was a lot of stuff there, and we had study groups, not the Bird, but a couple people in the Bird and other people who became workers after I worked at the Bird. We had study groups
around
how to move the labor movement forward. What's the major contradiction? Is it feminism within our group? Internals kind of stuff. There was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of meetings and stuff like that. And I mean, you realize how deeply ingrained you are in society, even though you might be a feminist yourself. Like, I remember 2 guys and I were supposed to meet as a subcommittee on something, and I can't remember what it was. So we were trying to figure out what date we could meet, right?
with the Bird or with us?
No, not the Bird.
Yeah.
Workers. Lefties who were doing union work.
Mm-hmm.
And one guy says, oh, I can't meet Wednesday, I have to babysit the kids. And I go, excuse me? You don't babysit your own kids. Tell me one woman who would have said, I can't meet Wednesday, I have to babysit the kids. He said, you have the kids. But, I mean, and he was a feminist, but you get so ingrained in your society that you come up with things like that. And he totally agreed with me. He said, oh yeah, it's like, but you don't realize that you're living, you're part of it too, even though you're against it. It's like, it's deep in people. All those things are, racism, feminism, all that kind of stuff. It's there, so So through those first couple of years after Vista and then the labor movement and the study groups, and we studied things, Mao on contradictions and on practice, maybe the best book he wrote, about how to implement stuff and how to do self-criticism and what's the most important contradiction here. Maybe that's not so important right now. And so, I mean, some people do that without reading that, but it's helpful to think about those things throughout your life. Like, what's the most important issue we got going on here? And you've probably been in meetings where people raise stuff that's completely off topic, And see, back then we go, that's not part of the major contradiction. You might say different words, like, let's talk about that next week. But when you have that kind of thinking, it's sort of helpful in some ways.
Yeah.
Then you have to figure a tactful way to get around it. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Speaking of, or in relation to things being so ingrained and trying to be self-reflexive and aware, what was your awareness of moving to a southern city? Like, you're raised in New York City, vacationing in Maine, out in Colorado. Like, you had...
Well, I'll start with my mother's. So my parents were here for about 7 months during the war. And then my father was on the flagship at D-Day, and then he worked for Admiral Nimitz in the Pacific. He was the Naval Intelligence Lieutenant Commander. But when he was here, and I was in St. Louis gonna move to Atlanta, I told my parents, and my mother said, "Oh, I was in Atlanta in the war. It was great. You could shop at Rich's and Davison's, and we lived out there on Druid Hills near Emory. It's really, really good." She said, "The only problem with moving to Atlanta is when you get out of Atlanta, you're in Georgia." Which may be slightly truer in her day, although it depends on what county you go to today. So I have to say that two things. One is, which is actually was a sigh of relief when I left in '91 to go back to New York. My wife made me move back to New York. The religious overtones here are it's just crazy. I mean, I was a member of the Communication Workers of America, all the 6,000 telephone workers in Atlanta in one union. Operators, linemen, cable splicers, whatever. There was a Baptist prayer before every union meeting. Not a moment of silence, not someone different each time, When I was here, there was a kid at Douglas County High School, which is one of the metro counties, and he sued the Board of Education because they had a Baptist prayer before the football game on school property. Separation of church and state. Of course, the Board of Ed said, "This is America, there's freedom of religion, we can do what we want." Fortunately, the court said, "No, we don't think you can." But they're going to have their prayer. So the AM station said, "Bring your radios, we'll put it on the radio." So they got their prayer. So and again, at the Union Hall, you have to pick your issues. That ain't an issue. We had a big issue which we fought for 2 years. The bylaws of 3204, which is the biggest local here, in the bylaws it said you could elect your shop steward, your job steward, for each group could elect the person they wanted to sort of deal with the boss. But it had to be approved by the local president. Weren't too many black shop stewards. He wouldn't approve me either. We said, maybe this is a primary thing. Maybe this is what we really need. So we had a group. We worked with the National Black Communications Coalition, which was mostly black workers in 6 or 7 cities, New York, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, a couple other cities, trying to make the union think about having black representation. And we spent 2 years trying to change the bylaws. So we actually thought that was more important than getting a good contract, because basically that means we're not having input into what's going on.
About what years was that initiative struggle?
75, 6, 74, 5, 6, somewhere around there. Yeah, that was an interesting battle. And then we also had another fight with a local in, I don't know what year it was. Anyhow, early there, somewhere around there, Greensboro, North Carolina, the Klan. There was a Communist Workers' Party demonstration, local demonstration against the Klan, and the Klan came with a member of the what's that thing called? Part of the federal government takes care of tobacco and I forgot the name of the group. Anyhow, they had undercover people, and they murdered 5 people from the Communist Workers' Party. He pinpointed them, came out with guns, killed them.
And the government, like
the government was in on it.
alcohol, tobacco, and
Yeah,
firearms?
those bastards. Yeah, right, those idiots.
Killed 5 communists.
Well, no, they were
Communists.
part of it. They didn't do it, but they were with the Klan. They did it. They
Right.
knew about the Klan.
Yeah.
So there was a national demonstration that 10,000 people came to. And 10 of us...
In Greensboro?
Yeah, and 10 of us from Communication Workers of America went and wrote and had a big banner. And we said, we are members of. We didn't say Local 32, TRBA 3204 protesters. We said, we are members of. That's all we said. Next union meeting, they wanted to know where my Communist Party card was. They put all this crap, which I don't think, it didn't have that much effect, but it was like, this is, if you protest this, we don't participate in demonstrations with the Klan or the communists. I mean, equating the two. That was early. Later on, that sort of backed off with some of that kind of stuff. But that was some of the things we did.
And the project that you had worked on with other unions around the country to get more black leadership representation.
Yes.
Did that succeed ultimately?
Yep. Well, it did. In fact, the National Union decided to have an Ethnic Affairs Committee. And each chapter had an Ethnic Affairs Committee. So, of course, nobody in Atlanta who was in the National Black Communications Coalition was appointed to the Ethnic Affairs Committee. I guess you could call them, other people were. Some members called them Uncle Toms, but I'm not saying that. But other people were appointed to that committee. So at least they started the process, and it happened nationwide. And I'm not saying that the NBCC, National Black Communication Coalition, was the main force that created that, but they were definitely an element that pushed that along, which was a good thing. And I have to say, there's a lot of reactionary unions out there today, but Communication Workers of America is one of the more progressive ones, for sure. They were one of the first early Bernie supporters and supported him almost all the way through. They're right on it.
So when you came to Atlanta, where did you first settle?
Penn Avenue, not far from Piedmont Park, a couple blocks from Piedmont Park, behind Grady High School. A little apartment, and then had that for I don't know how long, a year or two, and then I bought a house on Greenwood Avenue, which is sort of the neighborhood across Midtown, sort of across from where Sears used to be. Actually, right down the hill from us is where Cracker Stadium used to be.
So
That's
like
before
off
your
of,
time.
off of Ponce de
Yeah,
Leon.
yeah.
Yeah.
I bought a broken down house for $13,000. Yeah, we jacked it up, we redid the walls, we redid the plumbing, we redid the electric, all that crap we had to do. But
And now they've knocked it down or
No.
sold it for 1.5
yeah.
million.
Exactly. So that was, it was an in-town house. It was. Then when we got married, my second wife and I got married, we moved great neighborhood to raise kids. It's really good.
And a lot of other bird folks over there.
Oh, yeah. Some, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great neighborhood. It still is. I mean, it's still, yeah, it still is. There's no extra big houses. It's, I mean, the average, I mean, our neighbors who didn't have any kids, they let our kids play tackle football on their grass. They didn't care. The kids were playing.
And this is like in the early 80s?
Yeah. And then, or on Eden, I think Eden and Morden is a, corner shop. And that, back then, I think it was Pac-Man. So two of our younger kids, Shaka and Ben, we'd call them up and said, send Ben and Shaka home, it's time for dinner. I mean, it was like babysitters for us. It's that kind of neighborhood, It's, yeah, back in the day.
And was the strip still established and...
On Peachtree?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Bird was one block on the other side of it, I don't remember, 2 blocks.
On Juniper at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was still, there was still a little bit of the strip there. A couple of hippies around. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the Bird was, we get into the Bird now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had some major contradictions with the Bird. I had started as a distribution manager, and at that time we had, I think, 30 vending machines.
So you came into the Bird as a staff person?
Yes.
Paid?
Yes. Well, I paid myself because half the pay was me rolling quarters from the vending machines and giving people their money. That was part of the pay.
And what
good for bookkeeping, I tell you. I don't know how much.
What did that work out to about a week?
I don't remember. $60. I don't know. I can't remember. So I had seen an ad that Singles Register, which was an LA company, was a newspaper for singles, and they had 50 vending machines. They wanted to drop cheap. So I think we had a benefit. We were raising money, and I got these 50 more machines. So we would...
and they were in LA?
No, they were here. That was an LA company.
Okay.
And so I got a lot more machines. And we had people selling too. But the machines, we were getting a quarter for every paper. And I think the Film Forum, was that still in Anthony Mall or someplace? Anyhow, that would sell out. I mean, that was our big seller. But there were some things that I looked back at some of the issues, and not too far before I got there, there's an ad for subscription, and it had a woman with bare breasts as part of the ad. I'm going, what the fuck is this? And things had changed. And so the papers in a vending machine are folded in half, right? You don't have the whole page, you have half. And we had a guy named, I can't remember, John something or other. Big heavy-set dude, basically blind. Had drawers stuffed with donuts. But he was a great investigative reporter. And he started, I think, he may not the first, but he started to investigate City Hall and what was going on there. And he would write great articles. And I saw this as transition from a counterculture paper to more of a regular paper with a bigger readership. And that's what I thought we should do. And I would argue with the layout people. I don't care what you do in the bottom half, but the top half's got to be one of John's headlines with investigating the city. And that took a long time because they wanted to get into this psychedelic artwork and these beautiful pictures. And I'm going, what is going on here? So there was that. And then the other contradiction, which I thought was, I could see the point.
John Jacobs.
Yeah, that's it. I could see the point, but it just didn't make any sense to me. Of course, there was sexism within the thing, and who was doing what jobs, and all that kind of
This is in 73.
Yeah, a little bit of it.
To follow up or address quickly, how aware were you of what the Bird had been between 68 and when you arrived?
Very little.
And the...
Very little. Very little. I read a couple back issues, not too far back, but It seemed like, some of the articles were good. Some of it was just, I thought, sort of not going to attract too many people.
Because
I don't know, it was sort of, I don't know, too artsy. I don't know. Maybe it was just me thinking it didn't interest me. I don't know. But they came up with this idea that in order to combat things, we needed to rotate positions so everybody had a chance at something. And I was totally against that. I said, look, I understand that people might want to do other jobs. So if you want to learn to do one of the other jobs, or you want to participate, or you think this is only men can do this, and you want to do this, you're a woman, or only women do this, you should share a job. Rotating jobs? Some of us are good at some things. You do not want me in charge of layout. I can't read my own handwriting. This is not a good idea. There's other ways to promote people doing other jobs. But, this ultra-democracy thing is denying that some people have skills in certain things. And you're on a basic budget. You need people who are good at something doing those things, and other people can help and learn. So that was a little bit of a debate for a number of meetings. We ended up not rotating positions, I don't think. I don't think we did. And I was only
so that was phased out.
No, they never did it, I don't think.
I think they had at some point
Okay,
they were doing this.
Okay,
but
and I was
prior
only
to-
there for a year, so it's. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
point out two things that I thought were, we should do differently. And then I had problems with some of the vending machines in certain neighborhoods. People were trashing them and putting lead.
Yeah, before
Yeah.
we started the interview, you had mentioned. Can you recap
well,
that
yeah.
again?
I forgot the name of that club up Piedmont, I think it was. Big club. All the big names went. And we had big machines there. And then we wrote a couple articles about Cuba. And the next issue, the spray paint on top of the boxes, and a couple lead paint down a couple of the coin machines, and
In response to this article on Cuba?
yeah. So it was anti-Fidel folks, I guess. So I fixed the machines. I think one machine I fixed a couple times, and after the third time I said, I just won't put it there anymore. I mean, they weren't going out and finding all the other machines, so it was just a couple neighborhoods. So yeah, so I moved.
Along Piedmont.
Yeah,
as you-
I can't remember the place. So someone has probably mentioned this because we used to have benefits there. I don't know, it was a big place in the corner of a shopping center 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I had a couple sellers who did a great job. They sold a lot of papers.
Still street vending?
Yes, sales on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, street vending.
Or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
One guy, he had kind of white hair, I forgot his name. He'd been around before I got there. He was one of the big sellers.
Wolf?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, him. He's a big seller. He was great. Yeah, so I did proofreading. Monday nights was Roger would be the big typist because he could type like 90 words a minute.
Roger Friedman.
Roger Friedman, math major at Brown. And he told me, he says, if you want to proofread my spelling, you have to read it backwards. Which makes perfect sense, because then you look at each word individually, you don't read the sentence and go past it, so it sort of made sense. So I could hardly find any of Roger's mistakes. He was boom, 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 boom. He was quick. So that, I think Monday night typing and layout. Yeah. So, people participate in other jobs, not just yours, but because that's the way we worked.
Do you recall who was
And then
on
we
the layout?
had a mailing. I think Stephanie and Mickey Gilmore came in to do mailing, and they probably bring their babies, and of course we just opened a drawer and put a blanket in it, and that was their baby crib because we can have port of this, port of that, and they weren't going nowhere, so we weren't going. They do. And we had a big mailing, and then
And what did that entail? Do you recall?
labels, and then put them in mail bags and take them to the post office. And then I had a couple bookstores throughout the South. that wanted 5 or 10 copies, so we had that. Probably 10 or 15 bookstores throughout the South Florida, Alabama. You know, the few progressive bookstores that were around there, they wanted the paper, and we'd send them out.
Were you still sending to GI coffee houses?
Yeah, 1 or 2 of those. Yeah,
And
that's right.
also there was, for years, they would offer free issues to
Yeah, I think
incarcerated people.
the vets too, I think. I think we did some of that. Yeah. I can't remember the discussion about how many we should print each time, but I can't remember. I mean, the budgets were sort of crazy, and you know, we had benefits. We had every now and we get a named person to come in and speak. Oh, we had what's his name? The guy from Australia. He's written about the elephant and the butterfly, about Vietnam, and he's with Ho Chi Minh, and what the hell is his name? It's in here someplace. Pretty famous guy. He's written a lot of great books. He's dead. He did benefit for us. Yeah. He said he figured out a way to have a revolution in Australia. He says, take away their beer and tell them they're only going to drink Budweiser. What the hell was his name? It's in here.
And what was the need for the benefit?
The need?
Yeah. Why have a benefit?
Because no one was getting paid hardly anything. You know, and every now and then we had an expense. You know, we had a new machine we needed or something. I mean, it's just like, you know, we were making much money, and you know, some people had to leave to get a job, and some people were, you know, depending upon what your spouse did, if you had a spouse. It was basically salaries mostly. Cost of printing, you know, cost of mailing.
Just to
It was
keep
a tight budget.
keep
I mean,
it going.
think about it. I'm rolling quarters to pay people.
Right. Where was the paper being printed at that time? Do you
I don't
know?
I don't remember.
Do you-
I remember years before I got there was a problem getting printed, and they didn't take it to Alabama to get printed.
Yeah.
And they stayed at our friend's, at Virginia Durr's house.
Mm-hmm.
Who's old. My wife was actually born in her house, D.C.
Your current wife
Years ago, yeah.
was born in Virginia Durr's house.
In D.C., yeah. In Clifford.
How did explain that?
It's too long for this interview. Well,
At least the relationship
her
between
parents,
her parents.
her father fought in Spain. At aged 19, 36, 37.
Was he
English,
okay?
volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
International Brigade.
Yep.
Fought in the Talaman Brigade, Germans and English.
Mm-hmm.
Goes back, has diarrhea. Writes articles for newspapers, decides to go back. Your wife's mother runs away from home, tells her parents she's had some cousins, and goes with him back to Spain, try to get to the front. They can only get to Bilbao. And then for various reasons I'm not going to go into, they go back to England, and then they come to America waiting for this appeasement bullshit to stop so Esmond could join the army. So he joins, he can't go back. He goes to the Canadian Air Force. Decca knew Virginia and Clifford, and she stays with them. So, and 6 months,
And she's pregnant.
she's pregnant. And 6 months later, my wife's born. So Virginia has 4 daughters, so this is the 5th daughter.
And they had come to know each other just through political circles.
Yes. And they became great friends. And we stayed great friends with Virginia and her kids too. Actually, your last kid just died. So that was crazy Virginia. Oh, jeez. So here's a funny story. So the Coffins had stayed there sometime. Tom and someone had stayed there to get the paper produced.
Yeah,
Because they couldn't do
Montgomery.
it here.
Yeah.
Right, Montgomery, right? So years later, we have a party in New York, in Atlanta, we have a solstice party, and Virginia comes over, gets driven by a younger friend, comes over, is going to stay, think his parents are in town, so they're going to meet. So the Coffins put Virginia and Pat Sullivan, I think, drove her over. Pat Sullivan is a writer. She wrote a history of the NAACP. So they stay at the Coffins. So the next day we go pick up Virginia. She says, "You gotta get me out of here. The Coffins put me in a straw mattress." Hilarious. I guess if you're used to something and you go to the Coffin's house, it's a little different, you know. It's like, I thought that was hilarious. Typical Virginia.
Typical Tom and Steph.
Yeah, well, you know, that's what I'm saying. It kind of makes sense, right? You know, I mean, Virginia is she's just right out there. I mean, Dinky went to college out east.
And who's Dickie?
Dinky, my wife.
Oh, okay.
Constancia Rami. She went to college out east. And so she didn't go home because she didn't travel back then. Those days too expensive. So she took a bus to Virginia's. And Clifford picks her up, takes her to Virginia. She says, so Virginia comes swooping down the steps with her long hair and says, and she calls Dinky Dinky Donk. She says, "Why, Dinky Donk, why aren't you in Cuba fighting with Fidel's forces? Your father would have been there." Hysterical woman.
How old is Dinky?
Dinky is 77.
Okay. Had she participated in any Venceremos or?
Cuba stuff? No.
No.
She was a civil rights movement.
Okay. So when you're working on the bird, what was your? Well, I guess you've talked a bit about layout meetings. Some about decision making. Can you talk a bit more about?
It's hard to remember because I think we had weekly or bi-weekly meetings, and some of it was about production, some of it was about lead articles, and kind of what kind of benefits we were going to have, where we needed money. But it's too long ago. I can't remember too much of all that stuff.
Can you recall?
There was some about security. People who were against us were, keeping things locked, and a little bit about that.
Oh, because I guess this is just like less than a year after the firebombing.
Exactly.
And
But
so
I can't
in terms of
remember
keeping what like just
I don't know, the office, because people come in at different times, and sometimes you might be the only one in there because you had work to do and everybody else was home, and I think there was a little bit like that. It's really hard to remember.
But you do recall that there's concern at least.
Yes.
And
oh, absolutely.
And do you recall some of the other people that were really involved at that time? You mentioned Mickey and Stephanie, John Jacobs.
Well, John Jacobs worked there. Mickey and Stephanie just volunteered for mailing. Who else? I just throw a name. Crystal Brewer was there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Is
Rick? Rick was there for that year, and then they tried to start a new paper afterwards with Gilda, his second wife. They started. Did they start like Creative Loafing or one of those things?
I think they created something called Gazette.
Yeah, something else. I can't remember. They started something else.
Do you remember an offer that they made to the Bird?
Yeah, some offer. I don't know what it was, which got rejected. They actually offered me a new job, and I said, "No, I don't think so," because I saw the handwriting on the wall, and I decided to get a union job. I thought that was, for me, more important than this newspaper thing.
And the handwriting on the wall was that this wasn't a good venture, long-term venture.
Well, the handwriting on the wall was a kind of straight political paper that had some art and other things in it. Wasn't going to help the movement very much, I didn't think.
And what's the movement?
Well, for me, I always think I mean, there's anti-war movement, obviously, the Vietnam War. But the crux of lots of stuff I thought was building up labor unions. To me, has always been the sort of one of the most important things to do. Even now, when there's only 10% of members in unions, it's still one of the most important things to do because I think the unions built the middle class in this country. In the 50s, 35% of people were in unions. Why do you think we got a middle class? Now it's like 10%. And half the unions have sold out this shit. They go for a new contract and they do two-tier shit. Where new workers will never make what the old workers get, and they can pass the contract because the old workers are getting more money, and it's garbage. And so there's a lot of that stuff going on. So fight within the unions, to me, has always been the key. It's always been one of the most important things. And I'm in a teachers union now, and the key to me is which the teachers union, most of them don't do, is class size and what the hell curriculum are we teaching? Why do we have to teach this crap, this teach to the test bullshit? That's what teachers unions should be about. So I thought that back then, because I'd been in unions before I came to the Burbs. I said, I'm getting in the union. So if you're in Atlanta, you got to get in a union. You ain't got that much choice. Building trades, electricians, telephone company. So that's why I went to the telephone company.
And what's your impression of people's reception to the Bird?
Mixed. I think some people like the art, some people know about what music's playing, those kind of reviews. But I thought that, these investigative articles about politics was really great, and we should do more of that. Which we did a limited amount, but kind of left it up to John to do, but I thought we should have other people do things like that. I thought that was, it was in a transition period. And I thought that was important, but can't remember.
Transition how?
From more counterculture to main culture. Mm-hmm. I guess that's the simplest way to put it.
Yeah. And do you think that the readership, if you can generalize, and sort of public people, have talked about the Bird, that particularly in the early years, that the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, they were buying 10 issues weekly. Staff would come down, to the newsstand right outside of their main offices and buy to see what was being said, and that there's an influence that the Bird is making in the general public.
Yes, there's a limited influence, but I think if you're looking at transition over a period of time, that you have to think about, who buys them originally? So the people who bought it originally in the 70s, when it started,
68.
68. So 68. So then at 68, so then at 74 or 75, those people who maybe used to be 19 are now 25. So maybe they probably got jobs and they may be into something different now. Not to say you might want to also attract the current 19-year-olds or 18-year-olds. Mm-hmm. But that's a transition I thought should have been made, because these people are older now, and maybe they're interested in stuff, and maybe they're interested in what's happening with low-income housing, or where can I get a house that I can afford. You can still get a house you can afford back in Atlanta back then. But there was other issues that people who are 25 who might be interested in now that they weren't interested in when they were 19. So I think that's what I was thinking about, the transition, where are we moving towards that kind of thing, one. And two, maybe we should branch out to other people who weren't interested in the Bird back then. But there's this other point of view that you don't get in what we used to call Journal of Constipation or whatever it was. What's this other view? And if that's going to be another view, it should be local stuff, not national stuff, as far as I was concerned. And it's hard not to write about national stuff when you got the war and civil rights and all this other kind of stuff. It's too much. So I thought it should be more of a localized paper that people can't get anyplace else.
Were there several others that were sympathetic to that view?
A few, I guess, but people, it's hard. You have your own life. You're raising kids. You're not making any money. You got a spouse or not have a spouse, and what are they doing? And there's certainly a certain amount of hours in the day. But I think it's yeah.
In the time that you were there, was the office always in that one location on Juniper?
Yep.
And what was that space like?
I can't remember. It was a little crowded. It was.
Because it was an old house.
Yeah. It was an old house and a porch. With a mailing machine in the back, I think.
Like in a little shed, or?
Yeah, sort of. I can't remember.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I think it was a little shed. We had a couple of desks and typewriters, and we had I think a counter for laying out, a long counter for laying out the paper. That's about all I can remember.
Do you recall sort of what the neighbors might have been?
I don't remember, and I don't remember if it was all, I don't think it was all residential, but it might have been. I don't think it was. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. And what are the relationships among the staff, the volunteers, I think at this point they might have been referring to themselves as a collective?
I don't remember the collective thing.
Okay.
Maybe. There was, I think people kind of felt that they could say what they wanted to say at staff meetings. I think there was somewhat feeling about that. I think, like in any group, certain people were closer to other people and go for a beer together. Not with everybody, but with other people. Yeah, there was some of that. Some people were, some people were writers and they wanted to be writers. And other people were, I don't know how you describe me. Other people were into, this is a good thing and whatever I can do to make it work. It wasn't like I wanted to be a distribution manager of the Journal-Constitution when I got done being a distribution manager, as opposed to a writer who wanted to be a writer, and then currently there was a number of people who were writers, and maybe they wanted to be writers. And so this was a way to test out what they were doing, I think. So I wasn't one of those. I didn't have those skills. I just thought it was an important. It was also a transition for me moving from St. Louis to Atlanta. So it was nice. I transitioned. I found out a lot about Atlanta. I drove around a lot. And when the bird kind of got folded or started changing things after that year, I had previous history and felt politically that unions were the way to go. So I joined the union.
And what were you doing for pleasure in these years?
We would go, let's see, what did we do? We'd go hiking and fishing, Chattahoochee.
We, your family, or?
Yeah, and a couple friends. We'd have lots of parties. People would bring food. I mean, it was just still at the unorganized potluck. So you might get 3 tuna noodle casseroles because that's the cheapest thing you can make.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually we decided to have organized potlucks. Okay, you bring a vegetable. There was, a lot of that. Beer drinking. Yeah, some marijuana. Not too much drugs by then, I don't think. I can't remember. Some people drugs. Lake Lanier, maybe. It's back in then. Yeah. Back then, yeah. Since the bird, in the 80s or so, my wife and I would go to the jazz festival. It was on the train from Southern Crescent. The spouse went for 50%, the kids went for 25%. 11 hours, suitcase with peanut butter sandwiches, and stayed with friends in New Orleans, and so that was great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was all the 80s. I can't remember what did this. Yeah. So, we try to get out to the country someplace.
Yeah.
Hiking or boating was for me, or fishing or something.
Did you go to many concerts around town or
Yeah, a few.
films?
Yeah, Film Forum was really good. You could get a decent, yeah. I went to Film Forum a lot. That's true. Concerts. Yeah, I went to some concerts. I mean, big names coming. Yeah, that's right. I get into biking, which I'm still into. And I figured, and southeast section is great biking because it was the least populated section of the metro area.
The southeast section of the city?
Yeah, I mean, north.
Over by Ormwood Park and...
Yeah, past south of there.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Past 285, it's like nothing down. Well, back then there was nothing down there. So I used to bike down there, it was great.
By yourself or were you...
Mostly by myself.
Because I remember reading in The Bird, there was a column by Derailer, who I think was Tom Perry maybe?
Doesn't ring a bell.
But there was some organized biking
Oh, no.
and trying to...
No, not on me. No. And then, of course, well, later on, when the kids were involved in schools and stuff.
And I want to transition to Post-Bird. You've mentioned a couple times reading groups and your commitment and belief in that organizing workers is the way to go. How much were you aware of the political groups around Atlanta active at that time, trying to do this work?
It's kind of a blur, and I might not remember all of it, but there were some groups that I just thought were too dogmatic in terms of their approaches to things. Much more of those groups when I got back to New York. And I thought that after a while of working in unions and working within caucuses within unions to make them more democratic, which was my key, that if you do it for a while, you realize this is a long haul. It ain't gonna happen tomorrow. So shouting all these demands now is worthless and not gonna attract a lot of workers. And so there was some workers' world or some other trotz groups that do things that you can with them around the anti-war thing, but I didn't think that's what they were. I think just too dogmatic about stuff and has to happen now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the way things happen. Yeah. I mean, we had a pretty good group in communication in CWA, and I started there in '74, and we had a mixed group of folks, young, old, black and white, that were trying to figure out a way to straighten out our union leadership and change the bylaws. Took a long time.
And would you all have sort of reading groups on?
No, that was no reading groups. That was just, what are we going to do about these idiots?
Yeah.
And who else can we get to join us, and who's close to us, and all of that. Yeah. But there weren't any reading groups, but some people were, they were right on. They said, this is the most important thing. I mean, they would, they said, we have to do this, forget the other stuff. They would say, we have to have elected job stewards. These workers would say, that's more important than getting a contract, because we don't have our own representation. Whatever, their contract's not for us, it's for them. So, it was great. I mean, we had a hard struggle. We get up against the wall a lot of times, but it was difficult. But we all had good paid jobs. We had health benefits and pensions.
And you've mentioned a couple times in talking about life in the later 70s 80s about your kids. And I note on your biographical sheet that you list, I think, just one?
I have
You have a son.
I have a son, and my wife has 2 sons.
Okay.
And so when we got together, my stepsons were 13 and 10, or 12 and 9, and my son was 6. So my son had joint custody, half the time with me, half the time with his mom. And then the other 2 boys were with us all the time.
Okay. And you guys got together in 79?
Yes, yeah, I married in 80.
Okay.
So when we got together, so let's see what school. So Shaka was going to King Middle School. James was about to go to high school, and Ben was going to elementary school. I forgot the name of it. Anyhow, James. Dickie talked to force the Board of Ed to allow James to apply to what's that, mostly black high school out southwest, one of the better schools. And
Washington?
no, far out.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll know. And I can't remember. Anyhow, because this is Atlanta, you can push stuff through the Board of Education you can never do in New York, ever. So he got a right to go there, but then it was the missing and murdered children, and he's African American, young 15-year-old. He ain't standing on the bus corner waiting to take a bus waiting out there. He went to Roosevelt High School, which is now condominiums. They made Southside High School next to it. And so 2 of our boys ended up going to Grady High School, which at that time, maybe still only integrated high school by neighborhoods in Atlanta. So that was a whole other experience of stuff going on there.
And so your stepsons are African American?
Yeah.
And yeah, talk about you brought up the missing and murdered children for years.
Freaky. Yeah. We didn't let, you're not letting your kid, no, you're not going to that high school. It's too far away, not this time.
And you had mentioned, are you living in Ormwood Park? Because you mentioned...
We had, at that time, yes.
And you mentioned the community field and letting the kids go down
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the corner
cool.
store.
That was fine, that was fine.
So you felt comfortable?
Oh, yeah, that was a tight-knit neighborhood. Absolutely, integrated neighborhood, it was great. Parents looked out to other kids out the window, I mean, it was good. I think, what's his name, lives on that same block? Bob Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
Same block. Yeah, it's...
And sort of on a related, or maybe not related, but topically, raising young black men at that time, and right now we hear so much about how you raise young black men, and particularly interacting with the public and the police, and are those concerns discussions that you're having?
Not much. That's one of the reasons my wife moved to Atlanta when she got divorced. She's living on the Lower East Side of New York, mostly Hispanic community. I mean, schools were mostly Hispanic kids. And for various reasons, she wanted to move. She wanted to move to a town she'd been in before. And she picked Atlanta because she'd been in here. She knew a couple people, my best friend Ralph. And she also picked Atlanta because she wanted her kids to grow up in a city that had black leadership. Maynard Jackson mayor, I think the police chief might have been mayor. It's sort of lots of black leadership was here. And she wanted them to grow up in an environment that had that, because she's a white woman and she thought this was a good thing for them to do. And she'd been in Atlanta and she liked Atlanta, she had friends there. So that happened, and and so we knew people here, and the kids, are used to different people coming to the dinner table, and used to that kind of stuff, and helped worked out certain things. Like when our boys went to Grady High School, we noticed that the clubs were becoming segregated. The debate team became white, the football team became black, the track team became white, the band became black. So because the principal loved us, because we raised all this money for him, he let me have a school climate committee. After school, student leaders made chocolate chip cookies, and we talk about what's going on here. And I say, Jim, I've known you since the 3rd grade. You've been in a band. You come to Grady High School and you're not in a band. He says, well, my friends aren't in the band. I said, oh, your white friends aren't in the band. So we had this open discussion about what was going on here. And my wife, so Dick talks to the band leader, a new guy down from Baltimore. She said, well, listen, the white kids don't want to join the band because they can't dance. So why don't you have the black kids dance around them during halftime? He didn't think that was very funny. I thought it was hilarious. So eventually, not long, my son, who's a soccer star, joins the football team to be the place kicker. We thought that would be fair, right? Shaka Black joins the debate team. Shaka joins I think he was on the cross-country team too. So, and a few other kids start joining the band. And, once you just get a few kids do that, then the next kids that come in, they go, oh yeah, I'm in the band, because it's, it's not that it's not the racist at all. It's just what's kind of acceptable or not, I don't know what you call it. Anyhow, didn't take long, and all these teams started getting integrated, and if a couple teachers keep on top of that, it's really not a problem. It worked, although we thought he would be the place kicker and that would be safe, but it didn't work out so well because the guy couldn't hike the ball worth of shit. So he'd have to over Ben's head and he'd have to pick it up and run it in for the extra point and not kick it. That was hilarious. So that was kind of an experience in high school, and so...
And that's some years late, that's late 80s?
Yeah. 73, 80, yeah. Yeah, mid-80s, probably, late 80s. Yeah. Yeah, somewhere around there. So, we had that. Yeah. And then James went to Roosevelt, which wasn't such a great school. He did great. I mean, he was the valedictorian and did all this kind of stuff. And his guidance counselor we thought was adorable. So James is up visiting his father in Washington, and we get this big package from University of Georgia. Full scholarship, books, everything. So James comes home and said, James, did you apply to University of Georgia? He said, no. So we go to Ziggy calls, I forgot her name, Mrs. Ziegler or something, guidance counselor. She said, well, I have to fess up. James applied to only Ivy League schools. And in the last 5 years, I've never had anybody get into college outside of Georgia. I wanted to make sure he had a safe school, so I passed along your financial aid thing to University of Georgia. He said, okay, fine. I mean, she was looking out, right?
Yeah.
She's trying to do the right thing. We didn't get mad at her, but it was hilarious.
Where'd you end up going?
Yeah. Oh, Brown, undergraduate Brown.
Okay. And he went to Roosevelt, but Shaka went to Grady? And Ben went to Grady as well?
Yeah. They were both on the soccer team there. They were 2 years apart, so 3 years. I can't remember. 2 and a half years apart. I can't remember the college years. Yeah. It was a good school. Grady had some good stuff going on there.
And maybe I missed, why did James choose or end up at Roosevelt instead?
We were living right there, and he wanted to stand on the corner waiting for a bus to go. By the time the other kids went to high school, that thing was over.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a different ballgame.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
And just to go back and wrap up the bird, I think that you've intimated why you left the bird, but if you can just state explicitly.
Well, I had a child. I wasn't making squat. My first wife was in nursing school at the time, I think. And so financially, I needed to start thinking about that. It was in a bit of disarray of what was going to happen.
To the bird?
Yeah,
Yeah.
74, I think. Like what was going to happen here.
Yeah, I think that there were a couple issues of saying like,
Major stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna fold.
Yeah. So I said, okay, I'm out. I gotta get a job. You know, it was like, yeah, it was pretty clear to me. I had this nice transition. I helped the bird a little bit, but I had to move on. It was time to move on.
And so you go, is it Southern Bell at the time?
I went down to downtown Atlanta, applied to, at the time it was Southern Bell. Took a couple tests or something. They said, oh, well, you're overqualified, we're an operator. I said, okay, it's all right. I'll work for operator for a while, then I'll, they said, okay. So I was a TSPS operator in Norcross, Georgia.
What's TSP?
It's after cordboard where you used to plug in stuff. It's called Traffic Service Position System, where it's a computer. It would flash payphone, hotel, person to person, give me time and charges when the call's done. Back then, everybody used the operator for almost everything. So, you had to average 32 seconds a call, and it was an interesting job.
And was that a gendered position at the time? Because
Yeah,
I
well,
know
that's
that,
one
like,
of the
thinking
reasons.
back.
That is actually one of the reasons I got the job, because in 1970, women had sued, a union, I think, had sued AT&T Mobile for not upgrading women and not letting women in, linemen and cable splicer jobs, and operators were all female, so they said you should have some male, so I think that's part of the reason I got hired, maybe. So I think 10% of operators were male or a little bit less, so I think that's one of the reasons I don't know.
But it was noticeable that you were one of the very few
operators. And when I started, there was supposed to be a strike, and I'd get some people, and they go, oh, are you a supervisor there on strike? I said, no, I'm an operator. Where can I help you? And then there was some exchanges that did not have ANI, automatic number identification. Like when you dial, it already knows where the phone's coming from, so it can bill you.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a couple of exchanges that didn't have that. And we'd go, number please, 2 seconds, and we'd key the number and disappear. That's all, number please.
And exchanges, that's the
The
3 digits?
Yes, the 3 digits.
What is now 3 digits before?
Yeah. And every now and then I'd get someone I knew. Number please, thanks Tom, disappear. And they'd see me in the bar later. That was you? I said, yeah. Little things.
And so how long did you do that?
2 years, and then I transferred. I got an upgrade, $10 or $15 a week more, to a directory clerk, where we made up the 82 phone books in the state of Georgia, and I was in a team that transitioned from paper to computer. We worked in an office park, and it was only telephone workers in the building, and I had a grievance. So it's only telephone workers in this office.
And is this out in Norcross or?
No, it's closer in. I can't remember. Some office park out. I can't remember. Out in Piedmont, someplace or something. And it's summer, so I wore sandals. So I got called in the office. 3rd level general manager and 2nd level supervisor says, you can't wear sandals without socks. I said, what? It's summer. That's the purpose of sandals. I said, all the women are wearing sandals without socks. Yes, but that's not proper business attire for men. Anyhow, I filed a grievance. I lost. Well, that's because the union, they go, okay, we got 4 grievances. You take this one and we'll take this one. I mean, it's typical shit. But, we're going to make a big blow up over wearing socks. I said, fuck it, I got other shit to do. My son thinks that was hysterical. He still reminds me of losing that grievance.
Pick your battles.
I know, yeah. Then I did that for about 2 years. Then I became a construction clerk. was a clerk that worked in the office with the linemen and cable splicers worked, helping out, taking care of their schedule and all that kind of stuff. And then I became a lineman, but they changed the title because of the lawsuit. So now they gave us a title, but no one knows what the hell it means. We were called, instead of linemen, we were called outside plant technicians. And I did that for a number of years.
Because of the gender of
Yes.
lineman?
Yes. Then they didn't change the name manhole though. Then I became a lineman, then I became a cable splicer. And then I became a fiber optics cable splicer. And then I had a dispute with the phone company because they had a thing in manholes when we were splicing PIC, plastic insulated conductors as opposed to paper insulated. Whenever we spliced them in a case, we were supposed to mix these two chemicals up and pour it in it. It became jelly, so if you close the splice wrong, any water get in, it wouldn't cause any damage. And the fumes were horrible. We had air blowing down there for fresh air because we had a test with gas, but it was nasty. I mean, guys would put a little sprinkle, a little top on top, like as if they'd done it. And the boss would come by and knock it and go, "You didn't put it in here." So I filed a grievance. I said, "I'm breathing differently under these conditions." So the science wasn't completely clear about what was. You can only refuse to do something if you can prove it's unsafe. You couldn't quite prove it, but the phone company knew this was going to be a problem. So they gave me a test, which I passed, and I became the same pay scale, which is the highest pay scale of the phone company, a switching equipment technician at the big central office down on Corbin Street. So I did that until I left.
And when you are outside...
Plant technician.
Yeah. And what was the position previous to that?
Construction clerk.
Or splicer?
After that was splicer.
Okay.
So splicer's a little upgrade from mine.
And those are two outside of the office?
Yep.
Is it divided into like residential,
No.
commercial?
No.
It's just
No.
everything?
Right. Region. We handled north part of Atlanta, I guess. Yeah.
And you're, in addition to working your 8 hours a day, are you active with the communication workers the whole time?
Yeah. Well, I'm working in the caucus within our union. I'm a rep from our group. I'm not a rep for a group, but I could go to union meetings, and I work with other people to try and change the bylaws so we can get people elected, and work with NAAC, the National Black Communications Coalition, to get this. Well, at least we got this Ethnic Affairs Committee going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was some of that, and some meeting outside of work to do that stuff. Yeah, it was, yeah.
Were there any major flare-ups, strikes, disputes during your years
No,
working
we had
with them?
we had a strike, but it didn't last very long. Picket line, we won. They wanted us to pay for health care, part of our health care.
And you won so that they continued to pay?
Yeah, but their supervisors had to pay some of their own. They don't have a union. Management paid some of the health care. And I would get in, it's a little unbelievable. I would get in fights with even my brother, who was independent. They had to pay for their health insurance. He says, everybody should pay for your health insurance. I said, I'm paying for it. He says, no, you're not. The company is. I said, when we negotiate a contract, I get less pay because they're paying for my health insurance. Don't tell me I'm not paying for it. Oh, you have a pension. You get a free pension. I said, no, I get less pay each year. I've been paying into my pension for 24 years. Don't tell me I'm getting a free pension. The people don't, what are these people thinking?
So you just said 24 years. Were you with?
Southern Bell 17, and then 9X, it was New York Tel, then became 9X, then became Bell Atlantic, and then now the Verizon. I worked for them for 7 years. And then in the late 90s, Verizon decided to get rid of us old, expensive employees and gave us a pitiful early retirement. So then I'd moved to New York, and I was kind of out of the union movement, because all of a sudden there's this Brooklyn Union I'm in, and it's a little crazy. And so I decided to become a teacher.
And why was it that you moved to New York, and when?
My son graduated from high school. He's the youngest, and he was going to Vassar. And so my wife said, we got to go to New York. We can't retire in boring Atlanta. And she had a big house. We had a big apartment there, so it was kind of sad.
You had an apartment.
Yeah, well,
already.
she had an apartment. She had this. Her family had got this thing in '60, and friends of hers were living in it before, so we had like, we had a gift. We had a place to go. And then I applied to NYNEX because Judge Green split up AT&T in 84, when he split the phone company up. He said the workers shouldn't lose too much of their rights. So that since NYNEX was going to hire me, I would be hired with full pay, not starting pay. And in the year, I reached my 17-year seniority, so my pension was full. It's not like, and NYNEX wasn't paying any. Southern Bell had paid into the one pension program for AT&T.
Yeah.
There was one pension program for the whole freaking telephone workers around the country, Ma Bell. So the money that they had put into Ma Bell was then going to go to me when I retired from NYNEX,
Sure.
from Verizon. So they hired me as a maintenance cable splicer in Brooklyn. A whole different phone company. Jesus.
How so?
Well, yeah, it's so many differences. Amount of drinking, racism.
On the job?
Oh, fuck yeah. Racism. Which bodegas had slot machines in the back in Brooklyn. I mean, it was like, the racism was completely different than the racism in Atlanta. It was just, Atlanta, the racism only came out when there were no black workers in the room. It was just white telephone workers. And I would put up with it shit and I'd just leave. That's not shit. In New York, right out front. This guy rattled off, German guy said, I'm an equal opportunity racist, He wasn't really, because his racism towards people of color was much more nasty and biting than his racism towards, Irish who drink too much, or, he was Looney Tunes. He was my age, he was a Vietnam vet. One of my partners was Eddie Lowe. I'm 50-something, he's 24, grew up on welfare in Chinatown. Parents don't speak any English. His name's Eddie Lowe. Ratliff calls him Lo Mein. Eddie Villalobos, one of our other co-workers, 28, from Honduras. Ratliff says, you're not Honduran, they're darker. You look like a spick. So he calls him Spick Eddie. Then one day these two guys are working on the same truck, so Ratliff takes him his magic marker, the Noodle Brothers. I mean, that would never happen in Atlanta, right? Not gonna happen. They'll do it on themselves, but not right out front. So it's an interesting story because when I became a teacher, I had a special class called Terry's Men where I invited older African American Latino guys, 5 or 6. We go to a coffee shop, donut shop, and I throw questions out about, I'm sick of this goddamn Black History Month. What? I said, it's American history, but it's this 1 month stuff. And they go, yeah, and how come they gave us the shortest month? It was Latino American month. So I tell them about Ratliff, right? They go, that racist? I said, yeah, but it's more complex. I said, what do you mean? He's a worthless piece of shit. I said, no, it's much more complex. I said, if Eddie Lowe or Eddie Villalobos needed $500, Ratliff would give it to him the next day. They go, what? He's a co-worker. They're coming from this place. You don't know how Ratliff was raised. I'm telling you, he would give them the $500. This is just who he is. It's much more complex. I don't know if they believe me. It's true, but I don't know if my kids believe me. But I wanted them to know that things are more, it's not just... There's one guy, Ratliff called him, put on his front of his truck the lung. He smokes 3 packs of cigarettes and had a collapsed lung and still smokes. And drinks 24 beers every day at work. Every day. 6 zips 2 on the way in, goes in the central office where we have to move equipment around, comes in the central office with a paper bag and a straw like he's drinking a Coke. And he was nice. He saved all the cans for the homeless guy to take back to get recycled. Crazy people. Best cable splicer in the group. When he did something, good for 50 years. Big difference between telephone workers in New York and in Atlanta.
And where's the apartment that you moved to?
7th Street, 2nd Avenue, which older people call it Lower East Side. New people pay attention to the real estate people who call it the East Village.
So how's that transition for you from Atlanta to New York in the late 90s this is?
91.
Oh, 91, okay.
The transition was, took me a while to get into where the biking was, which was across the George Washington Bridge and up in New Jersey. But, you know, the biggest difference was that we have so many more visitors from around the country and different parts of the world that we know that come through New York that don't come through Atlanta. So really, that's one of the biggest differences. I mean, there's lots of other things there. We don't participate in too much, but we have that. And my wife left the Grady's because all black people call Grady Hospital the Grady's because it was built in an H and segregated up until 1964, so there was 2 hospitals. And so older black people still called the Grady's. Now I'm going to Grady. And then she worked at Bellevue, from Grady Emergency Room to Bellevue Emergency Room. So Bellevue, the first public.
As a nurse?
Emergency room nurse. First public hospital in the United States. So when she was working at the Grady's here, the kids would come home from school and talk about what they happened at school, maybe, or the sports team, and I would talk about some yo-yo at work. And nobody wanted to hear what she did at Grady Emergency Room. I did her. She was not allowed to talk.
And she abided by that?
Of course, it's disgusting. Jesus. What people put up in their bodies? Oh, Jesus.
I know, my mom was an intensive care nurse, and we were subjected to every single every day.
After dinner, she wanted to tell me about something, okay, but not during dinner. It's disgusting.
But she loved it?
Oh, yeah. You know, emergency room nurses they have 2 advantages over other nurses, if you're that kind of person. You're very busy, you have to think quickly, and more importantly for some people, you're not that emotionally involved in the patient.
Mm-hmm.
You either save them or you don't, and they're gone. Floor nurses, you get to know the family, you get to know the patient, it's a different, I think it's harder to take that job home than an emergency room nurse may be easy to take home, because it either works, the person died, you don't know the person, you don't know the family, it's just. Although one time she had a patient, 95, old woman, frail, terrible shape. 15 relatives out of the waiting room. She dies. They're all busted up completely, like, this can't possibly happen. So she talks to one of the younger nieces, or grandnieces. She says, okay, I understand it's a relative, but she's old. People are really, really upset. She says, you don't understand. No one in our families died before 97. It's all relative, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, well, okay. Can see that.
And was your wife involved in the labor of the profession?
Oh, yeah.
Both.
Actually, the Nurses Associations are one of the most progressive in the country. I mean, California Nurses Association spent 12 years pushing through the state legislature how many patients each particular nurse can see in a day.
No, that's California. Like,
No.
So what's it like between
The New York
Georgia
State
and New York?
Well, New York State Nurses Association has been more progressive. They're
Sure.
really pushing for, and we're about to. We might be getting single payer in New York State soon. We have one more Republican state senator to get rid of. State Assembly's passed it 4 times already, so she's working on that hand and foot. She's retired, but trying to get single payer for New York. So, and there's so much stuff that people just don't know. I mean, these rural counties are going to save money with single payer because the rural counties, property taxes pays for Medicaid. And if you combine it all in one state, these poor rural counties are going to be saving some money. Well, people don't know that, but yeah. So yeah, I think she's involved in that a lot. And then we also, 2006, we started a group in New York to support the Jenin Freedom Theater in Palestine, which is a cultural theater center in Palestine. And she was the head of the committee for 12 years, 10 years, and she's retired 2 years ago. I'm still on it, so we bring people over. We go to Palestine every year. So we still got plenty of things to keep us occupied.
Where in Palestine?
Jenin is the northern part.
And how long have you all been doing this?
2006. But we've been going to Palestine since 2002, towards the end of the Second Intifada.
And what brought you to that?
Well, we decided we needed to go do some investigation of what the hell's going on. We had some talk, we'd been to some talkbacks to other people. So 5 of us went. Dinky, me, her son, her best friend, and another guy came. And we got a great tour. We went to Gaza, talked to people all over refugee camps. Yeah, it was an amazing trip. So then a couple years later, we wanted to start something. And then we met the guy who started the Freedom Theater in New York. And we said, oh, this is what we'll do. So we've been raising money for them ever since.
And what does this project do?
It's in a refugee camp. It's a theater, and now it has training in film, photography, creative writing. It's theater. It's a theater, and it has a drama school, 3-year drama school. It's about to start their fourth crew of 3 years, and some of the graduates have done great work. In fact, the Freedom Theater just won the first all-Palestine theater festival. They won the prize for the best play, which was a play done by the third graduating class. Their graduation performance was on Return to Palestine, and it's about a Palestinian American, American coming to Palestine, never been, he doesn't know anything about checkpoints or anything. So it's actually a comedy, and it's hysterical. Yeah, so we go back there, and I also work for the last 6 years with a group called Al-Nazak, which is a scientific organization that's discussing the way science is taught in Palestine. And he's really into sort of hands-on, and I wrote him a letter saying that's what I do at my school. So for the last 6 years, I do professional development of how to do inquiry-based hands-on science for science teachers and facilitators at the Science House. So that's a lot of fun doing that.
And you mentioned that you have become a teacher.
Right.
When and how did that happen?
Well, when we were going to get early retirement, I always thought I liked being around teenagers. Like when I ran that group in high school in Atlanta, at Grady. So Dickie had a friend, a college friend, who started this Urban Academy High School, and I visited it and sat in classes, and I said, oh, this sounds really good, because it was one of the founders of the New York Consortium. We now have 38 schools in the state of New York, 36 in New York City, small, integrated high schools, but with a high percentage of poor kids, high percentage of ELL.
English language learners.
Yeah, and kids of color than the average public school. And we have a waiver not to teach to the state. The 5 state regions, we only have to teach to the one English language arts test. All the students have to do performance-based assessment tasks. So it's inquiry learning. For example, we said, what should kids know about science when they leave high school? They should know how to do scientific research and know the scientific method. That's what they need to know about science. So what can they do to show us they know that? That's what we should be doing. So we determined they needed to take some science courses, do some lab reports, and then when they're ready, create their own science experiment in any science they want. do research on who's done work on that before, have a hypothesis with a mentor, list of materials, carry out the experiment, collect the data, write up an analysis using whatever math level they're at, and then raise new questions. And then when they're done, and it's been revised, we invite an outside scientist to come in, and they discuss it with the scientist. And we do that in 4 major subjects. So it's a lot more work for teachers, but it's a lot more fun. And you're trying to figure out how to get the kids to think. And the main thing is, don't let them know what you think. That's not important to what's going on. So I mostly teach math, but my first course was basic repair and maintenance using the scientific method. Put out broken crap bicycles and tools and see what they can fix them, see what's going on here. So.
And did you know when you got early retirement and made the decision, I'm going to go into teaching, did you know that it was going to be for this type of education, this type of school?
Yeah, because I know the people who started the school.
Okay.
I said, I had been visited there before I even retired, or even thought about retiring. I said, oh, this is pretty cool. I mean, you go into school, the kids do most of the talking, not the teachers. And the kids talk to each other, not to the teacher.
Did you have to get additional credentials
Yeah,
for it?
I had to, well, I had an undergraduate degree.
Mm-hmm.
I needed a few extra credits. You need 36 credits in math because I was going to teach. So I got some extra credits in math while I was in the phone company. They paid me. Ha, ha, ha. The union argued with them. If you want to lay people, if you want to downsize and get early retirement, give them some education benefits so they can prepare for something else, which the union said okay. The company said okay. So they paid for that. And then within 5 years of teaching, you have to get a master's. So my first 2 years of teaching, I got a master's at the CUNY Graduate Center.
In education?
No. We don't want anybody to get an education degree. Completely worthless. You should get a degree in what your passion. If you're passionate about history, get a degree in history. Get your education credit someplace else. If your passion is math, get a master's in math. Get your education credits. Because we're going to teach you how to teach. You're going to do inquiry teaching. The kids are going to investigate. You're going to give them problems, not projects. You know, all these math people now doing projects, right? Elementary school, high school. They're doing math projects. Isn't it great? It's not right out of the book. I go, yeah, it's garbage. Do this first. Do this second. Do this third. Make a nice placard of your results, and that looks pretty. There's been no math thinking going on at all. Don't tell them what to do first. Give them a problem and see what they can do based on the math that you know they know. Anyhow, so that's what we do with our math. So I retired in 2012. I've been tutoring and working as a math coach in some of the other consortium schools. And this semester I'm teaching a course again because on the Urban Academy, the math teacher's on maternity leave. So I'm having fun teaching kids again.
Is that full time that you're?
No, one course, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I told her I was going to be in Atlanta, so they're teaching my one course yesterday. I gave her materials, and I'll be back Monday for my Tuesday class. So I'm only going to miss one class, I think so. But they have plenty of work to do. It's just, they have plenty of things to think about and do. And I've learned too that it's really, really important, which most math teachers do not do, because they all want to cover a certain amount of content, and they want to end the class covering some content, and the next class they pick up another content. And that ain't the way the brain works. If we have a discussion and there's some confusion, and the class is over, the next day's discussion is so great because the brain, the subconscious has been thinking about it all night, but the conscious brain has gone away from it. When you come back the next day, this discussion is deeper. It's like when you do the crossword all morning, you can't get nothing. You go out and do chores, you come back, you have lunch, you pick up the crossword, and bam, you get 2 or 3 more. You know, how did that happen? Well, the brain's doing something. And the discussions the next day after confusion sometimes are really, really good. So I hope they don't finish.
And is that how all teachers at this school?
Well,
We're
somewhat. I'm a
welcome.
math coach, so I'm talking to some of the math teachers at other schools. I sit in their classes, and then we talk about afterwards. And some of them they don't have to teach the readings, but they got this stupid SAT math in their brain. And I'm going, no, SAT math doesn't mean you're going to be good at college math. It might get you into a better school, but it ain't going to make you, it's not going to dictate how well you can do in college math. There's 1,000 colleges don't want your SATs. University of Pennsylvania started this year. No, you don't have to give us your SATs. And so I'm dealing with some of these teachers who still think they have to cover so much content and not critical thinking in math.
You were in Atlanta in the mid 1980s still. Were you aware or involved in the revival of the Bird for those couple of years in the 84, 85?
No. If I was, it was very superficial. I might have gone to a couple of meetings, but I didn't. I wasn't really involved in
I'm just looking through you very nicely completed a data sheet of all of your
that. My scribble.
work and involvement over the years. Well, you note that you're still involved with the United Federation of Teachers. To what extent, or?
It's the largest local teachers union in the country. It's like 80,000 teachers. And they don't go for class size and curriculum. And there's a caucus, there's a big caucus in there called MORE. And they got real problems, and they got some old, they're younger than me, but they're old Trotsky organizations trying to push every freaking issue that comes down the pike. You know, like immigrants. And they're all good issues, but you're a teacher's caucus. You should be leading the fight for what curriculum you have to teach and class size. 35 kids in a class in an elementary school? That's not teaching, that's like factory. And so, like, let's pick a couple issues and push the union for those. Not this whole, it's crazy. So I work with some people who are in the peripheral of that, although I don't have much hope. It's sad. And then work through the consortium, who are all union members too. We're trying to figure out a way to expand the consortium and do that with teachers. And the union, of course, likes us because we're a shining light where we graduate more kids than the average class. We can keep our waiver because our graduation rate, attendance rate, acceptance in college, and in college more than 2 years blows the state and city away. So and our kids are the same as everybody else. Poor, well, we have some rich kids, but poor, kids of color, ELL, and we're doing a great job with them.
And did you mention earlier that all of your students have either flunked out or been behavior?
Well, my particular school, not that a lot of consortium schools are not. We have a couple of transfer schools. So my particular school is usually second semester 9th graders or 10th graders who didn't do well in the previous school. Some upper middle class kids, they hate the test schools and don't like the private schools. A couple of them, every now and then you get a kid who has to be in school or he's a juvenile. Get a couple every now and then. We got a couple. There's a nursery downstairs for there's 4 high schools in the building, but there's a nursery downstairs for teen moms so they can come to school and the kids are taken care of, and 90% of our kids go to a 4-year college when we get done with them. We ain't broken, don't fix us with these tests. So it works. It's a lot of work, and it's run as a sort of a collective. So much the principal co-teaches the class, because if you haven't taught a class in 5 years, you no longer know what the school culture is like, because kids' cultures change. Everybody calls everybody by first name. You get respect by giving respect, not by demanding Mr. and Mrs. We don't use the word restorative justice, but we've always done that. The principal, there's one room where all the teachers have a desk. kid's naughty, does something stupid, the teacher and the kid come, the teacher, the principal's facing the wall, and turns his chair around, you're knee to knee. The principal, well, he's retired, he's still teaching the course back, like me. He's great. He says, so Ralph, and both of us are leaning over to listen to what he says. So we've already calmed down because we're trying to listen to what he says. So he asked the kid, well, tell me what happened. Then he asked the teacher, tell me what happened. And he says, we have a problem here. What can we do about it? I mean, it's just, it seems so simple. Mm-hmm. The teacher's irate, the kid's pissed off, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, what can we do about this? It works. I mean, now they call that restorative justice. Instead of kicking the kid out, it's like, so, it's a great school to work in.
And you also mentioned in some of the other organizations that you belong to that you're involved with Jewish Voice for Peace. Is this Badass Teachers Association?
A friend of mine started a group called Badass Teachers Association. Now there's one for almost every state. There's one Badass Teachers in Georgia. But the national one has 65,000 teachers on Facebook. So you find out what's going on in education in different parts of the world. In New York State, we find out if the state commissioner of education, who used to be a complete asshole, but I think we have a new one now, would be up in upstate New York, and we'd find out about it and how people were protesting them up there, and then people down here can find out about it. So it's a very good use of Facebook, because it's a political use, and it's for people who are already doing some kind of organizing, as opposed to 90% of the people on Facebook, they think posting something is organizing. So this is very useful, and so it's a communication thing about what's happening in education around the country. Mm-hmm. I'm a member, but it's not like I'm doing any organizing.
Yeah. And what about Jewish Voice for Peace?
I'm a member, but I give them money and I support them, and I have lots of friends. I have a couple people who are in the hierarchy of the organization, and it's grown by leaps and bounds, and it supports lots of stuff, and it's it's on the move.
And lastly, you mentioned the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference.
I am an official trail maintainer for the funds for the state parks in New York. All the trails in New York and New Jersey are maintained by volunteers. So I work with a ranger in Fonstar State Park, and I went to a 2-day training session, and I'm allowed to use a chainsaw on state land. So my wife says, "Are we going to go out and do Chainsaw Massacre today?" Because you have to bring someone when you go. That's one of the rules, it's a safety rule. So I'm bringing an emergency room nurse, so I figure I'm set.
So are you an active hiker and user of the trails as well?
Oh yeah, all the time. I'm on them a lot.
And do you travel?
We have a house 60 miles north of New York, so one of my trails starts right near the house. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of them. And I have friends who go with me and help clear the trails and stuff. So it's fun.
Yeah, no, people are.
You're out in the woods and people thank us. You see me hauling my chainsaw up the mountain to clear a deadfall. Yeah, it's not that much work, but it's fun. You can maintain the trails, good husbandry, picking up trash. Not too much trash, but pick it up, keep it clean. Report things to the ranger. And there was a deer stand. I reported to the ranger. He said he wanted me to take out my smartphone and tell him the location. I said, I ain't got one of those. So he came over and we walked over and he showed it and he took it on him. And the deer stand's legal during deer season. It has to be portable and you can't make any permanent attachments. And this one had a permanent attachment. They had a little roof they nailed in, so that was legal. He was so I get along with the ranger pretty good. He's a decent fellow. So and then there was another trail, not my trail, that there was a huge windstorm. I forgot what they called it, tornadoes, and all these trees went down. And my trail, and 10 trees went down, so 3 of us went out and cleared. And then there was another trail that's used that I told him I couldn't do it right away. So like 4 months later, I emailed him. He says, yeah, they're still there. So we went down and cleared 4 of those for them. Different trail, not too far from us. doesn't happen that much, but this windstorm was crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I've hiked through some areas where tornadoes have gone through, and
Oh,
it's
completely
nuts.
Yeah.
And you're an avid cyclist,
Yeah.
and have been for 30-something years?
Yeah. We used to do bike ride across Georgia, and in Georgia, hot as hell during the summer, but we did it just like a lot of water. I did it with my son, and then in New York, I do a lot of long distance biking. Yeah, I bike sometimes. Dick takes the car, and I'll bike up to Cold Spring along the Hudson River on the west side. It's about 65 miles up. It takes about 5.5 hours. It's a nice ride. So it's sort of, you go across the Bear Mountain Bridge, go past, see West Point across the river. Hudson Valley is quite nice. Yeah, and I bike in the city all the time.
Is that your main means of transportation?
Absolutely. Rain, shine, no snow. Rain, I bike, no snow.
And is the city
Well,
good for?
I'm an experienced bike rider, so I know I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. One-way street, I'm biking on the left-hand side because the biggest accident is being doored by a car. A car door is opening, and I don't know if you drive on the left-hand side, those are the passenger doors that are parked, so less doors will open. The driver will be right next to you, they can see you, they don't have to judge where you are. So if it's a one-way street, there's no bike lane, bike on the left. I mean, there's some of those things. And in some streets, it's rush hour, it's crazy. I just bike in a bus lane. They think it's the bus lane, I think it's the bike lane. And we're good, I let them go, we're good to each other. So this, and if a car's making a left-hand turn, and I look around, I go around them and don't wait for them to make the left turn and to crash into me. And that's a big accident thing happening now too. People are not conscious, new bikers are not conscious of that. So if you do it for a while, you're looking for people to be idiots.
Mm-hmm.
Like people texting, walking across the bike path. And of course, New York is different because the pedestrians think the curb ends at the end of the first lane, so they can get across the street a tenth of a second quicker. It's New York. This doesn't happen in Atlanta much, but in New York, they're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That you expect when defensive driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's great because it's so liberating. Because if I'm at school at 67th Street and I'm coming home to 7th Street and I want to stop at West whatever to pick up something or to go something, I just get on my bike and go there. If you're on the subway, you ain't doing that. You ain't getting off halfway, walk 8 blocks, pick it up, come back to the subway, and then go back. It's probably not going to happen. The bike, you get valet parking wherever you go. Park right out front, lock it up, go in. Yeah, very liberating.
And do you travel with your bike?
In the summer, a different bike, my road bike. I have a fleet.
Yeah. And so your city bike is more of a hybrid or a mountain bike?
It's got baskets on the back. It's a little heavy duty. Yeah, I carry all kinds of stuff on that.
Mm-hmm.
And my road bikes are really lightweight road bikes.
And do you go on like biking destination? Like I want to go here and bike this?
No.
Certain.
No. We have a house in Cold Spring, and I investigated all kinds of bike rides around here. I like hills. I look for hills to climb. I look for hills to climb, and I look for roads that don't have too much traffic. And so if I go to East Putnam County, it's pretty vacant there. So I've got a number of rides there that I go on. So yeah, I have a friend who goes with me up there. I'm training him to be a bike rider. So.
Do you ride with Tom and Stephanie when you come here?
No.
On their comments?
No. Yeah, no, I haven't ridden here since I left.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I think we're coming up on, we're past the time that we
Right.
need to wrap up.
Right.
Is there anything that you wanted to add before my last couple questions?
No, I don't think so.
So from the point we're now 50 years from when the Bird began publication and coming up from 50 years when you were involved, how do you look back and reflect and feel about that time that you were involved?
Well, for me personally, selfishly, it was a great transition to get to a new town. Because bam, I'm thrown into this. I have people who are sort of politically similar to me and what's going on and where they are, different. And also as a distribution manager, I'm driving around the city. I mean, bam, I'm thrown into, and I got a good acquaintance with a new town. So, I mean, and the political people here too. So it was, you know, it's a pretty good way to move to a new town,
Mm-hmm.
which is always a difficult thing to do.
Which you're not alone in. Other bird people, I think, have.
Yeah. Yeah, because
It's
a lot of
similar.
bird people are from different towns, clearly
Mhm.
not from all from Atlanta. So I think that was, you know, that was, yeah. And I've made friendship with some of those people for a long, long time. In fact, Saturday I'll see Tom and Stephanie and Mickey and Abby.
And we've talked a fair amount of what you've been passionate about throughout your adulthood. But just summing up, if there's anything else to add or state more explicitly, what are some of the ideals, biggest concerns that you have right now?
Well, I'm going to somewhat go the opposite way.
All right.
I'm going to tell you how positive I am about things. Although we're in a particular section now that's been growing for years since Reagan, when neoliberalism sort of took over the world, particularly the United States. It's nothing but war, and the banks do whatever the hell they want. Let's say fair capitalism is like taking over, and Clinton destroyed everything when he signed away in '92, where the banks could be national banks and no longer state banks. And then in '98 or '99, he signs away Glass-Steagall, which worked quite good since 1933 when it was passed to keep them from playing Russian roulette with our commercial money. I'm pretty positive, even though we're in the middle of this crazy presidency. Because in 2011, when Occupy Wall Street happened, that was the first time since the 1970s that people in their 20s and 30s had the onion peeled back about what the hell's going on here, about the 1% and 99%. So in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, nothing was happening on college campuses except for late 80s, early 90s, divested South Africa. But basically, there wasn't anything else going on. It was like me generation, I want mine, and I mean, there was nothing going on. You had Occupy, which really opened up people's minds to all kinds of stuff. You had Black Lives Matter movement started about a year or two after that got a lot of white support. You had the biggest demonstration in the country's history with the Women's March, which happened, you know, huge in DC and 40 other cities, I don't know, right? You had an incredible influx of young 20 and 30-year-olds working for Bernie Sanders with the word socialism going on. I mean, if you put all that together, these movements are all in the right direction. It sort of gives you hope for like, oh shit, there's stuff going on. And I'm involved in the Palestinian struggle and getting rid of this occupation crap. And there's like, I don't know, 200 chapters of Students for Justice in Palestine in college campuses around the country. And a lot of memberships are Jewish. I mean, there's a lot of young Jews who say Israel does not represent Judaism to me. It's growing. So, although we're in this, you know, disaster, and there ain't much difference between the Democratic and Republican presidencies in terms of war and the banks, which is, to me, the most important issues out there. There's this other stuff, movement going on, so I'm kind of positive about that. It kind of reminds me of, we wanted some new members in our Friends of the Janine Freedom Theater group. My wife, 10 years running things, she said, "I'll take one step back." Another person left. So we only had one requirement. You could not be Medicare eligible to be a member. Because we'll disappear.
Yeah.
So, but that's sort of opposite of what you kind of asked, I think.
Well, just what your ideals and
Yeah, well, that's, you know.
ideas are right now.
Well, yeah. neoliberalism and the fight back now is starting to get nice. I wish there was a peace movement, because that's the worst thing. I mean, people don't know we're bombing 7 Muslim countries right now. We're bombing 7 Muslim countries. Why do they hate us? Well, just stop dropping bombs on them. Maybe they won't hate us.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground quickly.
Good. I'm glad you think it was quickly.
So thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you
coming
guys for
in.
doing this. I think it's could be useful for some folks
I agree.
in transition period.
Well, thank you very much. We'll wrap it. And,
Okay.
But if you think of anything else to add, you can certainly contact us. You can
Okay.
send an email. We can add it to the file.
Okay.
We can do additional recording if necessary.
Okay.